Hello, brothers. My name is Doug Draper. I'm a graduate of the University of Kansas, and I'd like to welcome you to On the Banks. On the Banks is the only fraternity podcast where we meet brothers, share stories, and embrace the shared values of Phi Gamma Delta. Today, we have an awesome discussion going on with a couple of brothers I got to meet last week and been thoroughly impressed with what they've accomplished. And I'm excited to share it with everybody here. So we're going to talk about an event that they put together many years ago called Bike4Alz. Alz stands for Alzheimer's. And I think the show title is one that we came up with, guys, last week was "It's Time to Do Something Different." And we can explain what that means here in a few minutes. But before we get into it, I'd like to welcome Tyler Drury and Charles Vittitow. They're both graduates from University of Western Kentucky. Chaz was 2011, and Tyler was 1 year behind at 2012. So, gentlemen, brothers, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Nice. So anyway, before we jump into it, Bike4Alz is a unique title. And so I think the best place to start is at the beginning. So I'll kind of defer to Tyler. Why don't you kind of kick us off here? I think you both have some good input on it, but talk to us about what Bike4Alz is and kind of the origin story, the why it all came together. I think that's a good place to start. So Tyler, let her rip.
Absolutely. Well, even you asking me, Doug, just gives me cold chills because this is a story that's so near and dear to my heart. And that's kind of how it all started. I think to really appreciate where Bike4Alz came from, it's important to know I'm an only child on one side with my parents. My mother's also an only child. So it's very close with my grandparents on that side. The only grandkid, spent a lot of time with them growing up. And really my papa was a big inspiration to me as a kid. He taught me how to work hard. He taught me how to garden. He taught me how to build things. And he was retired when I was born. So I had a lot of time with him. What I started to notice is in high school, he was diagnosed with dementia, and that started to taper on as I moved forward. And, it was one of those things where I had an unhealthy grandparent, and I think a lot of people go through that, but I didn't really understand what that meant until I had been selected for a summer program in Japan after my senior year of high school. And before I left, my parents sat me down and they said, "Hey, before you leave to go halfway around the world, what are we going to do if your papa passes while you're gone?" And that's when it really hit home with me that this was serious. This was kind of an end of life situation, and that my grandfather could be taken from me at any moment. And I think I spent a lot of that summer. I didn't know how to speak Japanese when I went to Japan. So I spent a lot of that time just thinking about my family, what my life was going to look like heading off to college when I returned, and kind of where I wanted my life to head in the next 5, 10, 15 years, making a plan. So I created a bucket list while I was in Japan on my 18th birthday. And number 6 on that list was cycling across country. I think that it sounded cool. I had always aspired to hike the Appalachian Trail or do something like that, but didn't know if that would ever fit in a timeline with college and grad school on the horizon. But when I started to think about doing an event like that with a purpose, for a cause, and in my case for Alzheimer's, that's how that started to come together. So actually the first year that we did it, which was in 2010, so we spent from early 2009 all the way through to mid 2010 planning for this thing, about 18 months. We called it Fiji's Across America on the front end. And that's how we rode across country and marketed ourselves, and we were able to raise $60,000 doing that our first time. But it has since turned into its own nonprofit that we've called Bike4Alz. We have a board of directors, and we've had dozens and dozens of riders complete this over the last 10 years. And we've raised well over $300,000 for the Alzheimer's Association since.
Tyler, that's pretty amazing. I know you talked about who got started with you, right? There was this kind of 6 brothers that really led the charge. So Chaz, I have to ask you, how did you get looped into being one of those 6? Tell me what your reasonings and passion was, because I know the chapter is a lot bigger than just 6 brothers. So tell me your interest.
Yeah, well, Tyler was obviously one of my really close friends. And I think, I can obviously touch on this more, but one of the main reasons I joined Fiji to begin with was because I really was impressed by the other young men that were signing up for the colony at the time. And Tyler was just one of those guys that I kind of latched onto and said, "Oh man, this this guy wants to do something with his life. I want to do something too, but I feel like I'm stuck. I can't do it alone. And when he said, hey, do you want to ride your bike across America? That was kind of enough for me at the time. It's like, heck yeah, I want to ride my bike across America. That sounds like an awesome adventure. For me, my grandmother has since passed from Alzheimer's, but she was kind of in the early stages of dementia. And so that was another thing that kind of tugged at me, was she was already starting to forget who I was a lot of times. And there was just the slow, painful process of that disease was hitting me. And the adventure alone probably would have been enough. But then when Tyler kind of told me that this is what we're going to ride for, then I was like, yeah, bro, let's do this thing. I'm in. So.
Yeah, that's cool. I think most college pledge brothers and chapter brothers would say, hey, are you interested in going to get a Chipotle burrito? But Tyler, you take it to the next level, man. That's cool. And it's really nice that you guys had a common bond with that and had family members that were impacted and really went through. So it's a good story. So let's talk about kind of the adventure itself, right? So you spent 18 months getting ready. You pick a coast to start. Talk to us and walk us through kind of how things went. I know there's some brothers you met along the way, some interesting people that were not related to the fraternity that impacted your lives. And how the heck did you make a journey across the country on a bike, right? That's amazing. Why don't you talk about the journey itself a little bit?
I'll start off, just tell you a little bit about the route, our timeline, and what a day looked like. But we picked a route that there's a Trans-American route that starts in Oregon and goes to Virginia, and then there's a route that starts in Southern California and goes to Washington, D.C., and we kind of combined those two. It gave us a route that was 3,200 miles. It was from Oceanside, California to Yorktown, Virginia, went through 9 states, 3,200 miles. We averaged about 78 miles a day. So that would be waking up at 5 a.m., tearing down our campsite or getting, our sleeping stuff put together, having breakfast, and then we would do a morning dedication each day. I'll maybe let Chaz talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's a really cool part about how we approached each day. But 78 miles, the preparation was unlike anything I've ever done. I mean, I spent 18 months riding a bike several thousand miles around in Kentucky and thought I was as prepared as I could be. And then I remember us being out in California the week before the ride started and doing what we called our kind of training ride. And we did 40 miles through this. And I think all we did was climb one hill in California. And in Kentucky, it's like riding a roller coaster. You got steep inclines, steep declines. And so you just got this heavy kind of rolling hill flow all of the time. And I think we had to climb that hill in California for a couple hours. And it was like, I was like, man, I spent 18 months preparing for all of this, and none of it helps right now. So it was a whole nother world. The terrain across the country was amazing. I think some of my favorite parts of the country were northern Arizona. Missouri was really pretty. It was really muggy. And then coming into Virginia was a beautiful area. But I mean, we slept anywhere and everywhere we could find accommodations, a lot of campsites. We slept on a courthouse lawn one time. We would call churches the day that we were riding into a town and say, hey, do you have anywhere we can sleep? And they'd say, yeah, you can sleep on our fellowship hall floor. And they'd bring people over and have potluck dinners for us. So it was really pretty amazing. I think we had a lot of preparation, but having been the first time we had ever attempted this, there was also a lot of times where you're just flying by the seat of your pants and doing whatever you can to get to the next day.
Yeah. I think when we were talking earlier, I think you guys, Tyler, I'm not sure if it was you or Chaz, but a quote from Mike Tyson: everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face, right? So when you're talking about that 1 hour or 2 hour hill climb out of California, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, I would say that was my experience. Was when we were training, there was this, I forget the name of the hill, Tyler, you might remember it, in Bowling Green, that we would ride all the time. But anyway, it was kind of this one killer hill, but at the end of it, you always had a really nice steep incline. So our steep decline. So Tyler was right. In California, we kind of got punched in the face before we even started the ride. But the one thing you cannot train for, and if anyone's looking to ride their bike across America, you could ride, hundreds of miles a year or a month, whatever, but you can't train you're behind for how sore it's going to get after you're in the saddle for 3 or 4 days in a row. That is one thing that you never get used to, because as the ride progressed, you kind of just get in better and better shape. You get to the point where your legs don't get super tired, even if you're climbing a hill. But every single morning I got in the saddle, the first 15 miles, my rear end was just so so much pain. So I just can't emphasize that enough. Just be ready for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would do things like I remember we would all wake up early and go to this spin class at West Kentucky's gym. And there was a lot of people who got behind us. There was a ton of people who reached out to us and said, hey, I did this. I rode my bike across America once. Let me sit down and talk to you guys. There was this older guy at a church in Bowling Green that had us over and kind of showed us a video of his ride. And there was a lot of people who gave us a lot of support just to say like, hey, you guys can do this. It's going to be okay. And then we just tried to, we were busy college students at the time. I was the president. Tyler was the treasurer. We were, just started a new chapter on the campus, and it was a busy time. So we did the best we could. At the end of the day, we just had to get out there and ride. And then we got enough momentum to get to the other side of the US. So
yeah, that's great.
And I'll come back real quick to
sure.
the dedications part of the day, which I think was probably the most special part of it for all of us. We had a thing on our website, and we'd posted on Facebook and taken stories from other families and people that have been affected by Alzheimer's, and we collected those together. And so whether it be 1 or 5, we would pick certain days. And I mean, for instance, my grandfather passed on July 10th. And so that day was the day that we get dedicated to him. But each morning we would wake up, and after we had had breakfast and we had gotten dressed, and we had put the I think it's called Belgian butter. It's like this like lotion you put in the pad on your bike, like the butt padding of your cycling shorts. And like Chaz said, I don't think there's anything that prepares you for that, but we tried anything and everything people had invented. Anyway, we're preparing for the day, and then we would have our dedication. So we'd gather as a group, we'd say a little prayer for the day and good health and, good weather. And then we would record a video dedication for that day, and we'd upload it on YouTube. And we'd have families all across the country sharing the story of what we were doing and their family members and what their life had meant to them. And knowing that whole day, the 60, 80, 100 miles we were biking, we always had that person or that group of people that we were thinking of. So I like to say, I mean, riding our bike across country sounded cool, but there are certainly hills and days and situations where the last thing you want to be doing is sitting on a bike for 12 hours. But when you have a purpose and a reason to be doing something, it's really easy to pedal up a hill in Arizona that might be difficult otherwise if you were just doing it for your own purposes. So I think I always felt encouraged knowing that every pedal stroke meant something, and I felt like we were getting, an inch, a foot, a mile closer to a cure for Alzheimer's. And I can confidently say that since 2009, there's been a lot of progress in this country with the research funding, with Congress getting behind some different initiatives. I think the advocacy and awareness is much more widespread, because this is a disease that is supposed to affect 25, 30% of grandparents by, in the next 10, 20 years. And so I think we're all going to have a direct connection to that before long, and everything that can be done makes a difference.
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it when you said every morning you reset for a purpose. You could go 1-2 weeks and just say, what are we doing here, and focus on a lot of the negative. But I think that was really impressive that you found that purpose every morning at 5 a.m. to get you through the next 12 hours or so. So that's cool. One quick question, because I know I'm from Kansas, and I know there was a funny story when you were rolling through a small town there. So tell us about that experience in Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Chaz, you got it?
Yeah,
Oh,
Chaz,
yeah.
why don't you roll with it? No pun intended.
Yeah, so we Pittsburgh, Kansas was actually, there was a lot of cool things that happened there, which maybe doesn't happen a lot, I don't know, in Pittsburgh. But we were riding through, and one of the things we did when we rode, because to pass the time, keep in mind this is before like Bluetooth headphones and all that stuff. So we were just kind of riding out in the open air. And so a lot of times we would sing, we would sing these songs, Johnny Cash, country songs, whatever. And so we're riding through this little town, and we're kind of dragging along, trying to finish up. And so we're singing Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash and kind of one person would start, and then either all six of us would join in. And this guy pulls up, and he's an attorney in town. His name is Kevin Mitchelson. I believe he's a brother from Kansas as well,
Yep.
from the University of Kansas. And so he's like, "Hey, are you guys the Fijis that are riding across America?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "No way. I've been hearing about you guys." And I don't really remember what transpired after that. I just remember having this kind of like crazy encounter. We already feel like we're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, if you're in a small town in Kansas, I feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. And then we ran into him. And I also remember that night we actually spent the night at the mayor of Pittsburgh, Kansas's house. Like, we slept in his house. So that was a pretty cool experience. But
yeah. That's really cool.
Kind of crazy moment.
Well, that's the whole point of the show, on the banks, right? Meeting on the banks of the Sweetwater River. You met on the side streets of Pittsburgh, Kansas. So that's really cool.
Yeah, there's so many crazy moments. Just people that you meet along the way, and they're sharing their story, and they hear about you, and they see you on the side of the state road, and you definitely learn a lot about the amazing, just human spirit and people just wanting to get behind something. So there was lots of stories like that.
Yeah, that's great.
It was cool, Doug, last week to just be on the phone with Chaz again. And when we got off the phone with you, we probably talked for an hour while he was driving home. And I don't know the last time we've done that. It might have been a couple of years. And just kind of reminiscing through those old stories, and a time in our life that I think both of us would say is one of the most enriching and amazing. And so, during an election year, when a lot of what we hear on the news and in the media is can be frustrating or feel like it's tearing the country apart, to kind of think back to these times we spent in a lot of America's small towns and going all across the country and just seeing the kindness and generosity in most people's heart, I think is encouraging for me all the time to reminisce on and look back on. And you're talking about the on the bank stuff. Chaz talked about this story last week, but I'll just throw this one out real quick.
Mm-hmm.
We were staying on a Native American reservation in Arizona one time. This is probably 5 days in, and we were pulling in late at night. We'd probably biked 100 miles a day through the desert with no water. And when we started, we were trying to save our money. So we had our support driver not paying for bags of ice. We were just drinking our water lukewarm. But hey,
there we go.
Hey. Sorry.
That's okay. New
potential rider. I think that day, any of the water that we drank was probably 97 degrees out of our Gatorade bottle. It was miserable. Anyway, we almost ran over this couple's dog in a campground, and almost killed it with our Suburban, and we felt horrible, and we were kind of avoiding them in the campground. And then we had to walk to go to the shower room or something, and ended up talking to them. They were playing two old instruments. I think one of them had a big old bass. What were those, Chaz?
Yeah, the wife would play the stand-up bass. The husband played the dobro.
Yeah. So we
had two guys with guitars. So
two guys that were awesome singers. One of them writes music in Nashville now for a living. And so we just hung out with them at their campfire for several hours. And it turns out they were from Virginia, which is where we were ending. And they came, so we saw them a week into our ride, and they were there on the beach with our parents when we finished 7 weeks later. And
wow.
Then, that was in July of 2010. And then in October of 2010, I got a $3,000 check mailed to the fraternity house from this couple. And they said, "Hey, what you all did this summer was so encouraging, and we were so inspired by it. We had a little backyard concert with some friends and family from around the area, and we raised this money just for you all." So stuff like that is things that you could never plan on or predict, but it just shows you, what amazing people there are out in this world.
Yeah, very true. So we're going to leapfrog over to, you're kind of across the finish line, and the event is done. We talked just now about some of the impacts, but all right, you planned it. You had this idea of what it was going to be like. You're in the moment. You did the race. Now it's all over. Talk to us about how it impacted, your goals, and did it achieve the mission of Bike4Alz?
I'll kind of start off with my perspective. So, for me, again, I think it was hard to know exactly what the impact was. I think the first people through the wall always get bloody, right? I mean, we were just trying to actually make it to survive it and raise some money and awareness. I would say that if anything, I haven't been as involved postgraduate and post ride as probably Tyler has, so he can speak more to it. But I'm just really proud of the fact that the chapter, Chi-Eta at Western Kentucky has continued to do this. That it's just a much more streamlined process, that they've, been able to raise more money and form their own nonprofit. There's so many graduate brothers that have helped people out along the way. When we did our ride, basically until we got to like probably maybe Missouri or Illinois, we just didn't know a lot of people in the West Coast. And so we were kind of on our own. And now there's just so many other chapters who have said, hey, we want to help you guys out. Hey, let's get you in contact with us. We'll start these events for you. And I'm just really impressed with the impact and the momentum they've been able to gain. And the fact that there's guys that sign up, and, every 2 years, there's guys that say, hey, I want to do this. I want to take my summer away. I could be working, I could be getting experience for whatever graduate school or job I'm trying to do. But instead, I want to be a part of something bigger than myself and be a part of an adventure of a lifetime. And so I think when I first finished the ride, I just felt like, okay, we did this bike trip. We raised some money. We had some cool experiences. But now that I'm 32 years old and I can look back 10 years, I'm just really encouraged by the spirit of these young men that have continued on, as well as the fact that, it's just gotten better, in spite of, the guys have just progressed it. So I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, that's great. Tyler, what's your thoughts now that it's over in the moment? Did you accomplish what you had set out to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that and then some. Really, when I conceptualized this whole thing, I just wanted a group of us to do this one time and raise some money. But seeing the evolution of the ride, when we finished, I remember the day that we finished in Yorktown, Virginia, and we touched our front wheels to the Atlantic Ocean after biking 3,200 miles, and we kind of all got together. And what we took away from that, kind of last moment together was, we might have pedaled the whole country and biked across country, and we felt like we had accomplished our goal. But really, the goal was to see an end to Alzheimer's disease, and that hadn't happened. And so we knew that there needed to be more that came out of that, whether that be just in our personal lives for advocacy, or maybe inspiring the next group of young men to continue the tradition. And I remember Chaz was president before I was, so he graduated, a year after we did this. And in 2012, when I was graduating, I had been president before, and I just remember telling everybody in the chapter, Alzheimer's was the thing that I cared about. It's what I was passionate for and what I decided to dedicate my time to. And I didn't care if Chi-Eta ever did anything for Alzheimer's again. I just wanted the men in our chapter to continue to be philanthropic and to do things they were passionate about, whether that be breast cancer research, veteran-based funding. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. If this whole bike ride switched tomorrow to benefit a different purpose, I'd be just as happy knowing that young men are committing to something bigger than themselves and putting time and effort into, making a difference in this world. But it certainly makes me proud to look back and see where we started, where we've come from, and to know that I could probably not keep up with these guys for a day on the bike anymore. By the time they get to Kentucky, I try to join them whenever they come through. But I think the best part for me is that when you lose a grandparent, a loved one, anybody that it can oftentimes be, a sad memory, something that's discouraging to look back on, something that maybe makes you cry out of sorrow or longing for that person. But anytime I visit my grandfather's grave where he passed, I smile. And that's because I get to see what his life has meant and continued to be, and the legacy that he's left behind. So even though he had to suffer through that, and I, saw him at the end of his life suffering from Alzheimer's, I know that it was for something better and bigger. So,
yeah. Well, on a personal note, the simple fact, I always say in the fraternity, you got the 4 years that you're there, You always know maybe 1 or 2 grades ahead of you and 1 or 2 grades after you. So there's an impact time of maybe 6, 7 years. And the simple fact that this didn't disappear, right, in the sense that it wasn't a short-term gig, and it's sitting here, it's living and breathing, it's continued, and you guys are not driving the boat anymore. This validates how impactful this was to your chapter. And then obviously all the brothers and individuals that have reached out. So I have one more question I'm going to save for the end here. But I want to ask you guys if brothers wanted to learn more about Bike4Alz or potentially get involved, how do they do that? Is there a website? What other recommendations would you have for undergraduates that wanted to learn more?
Sure. So you can visit bike4alz.org, and there's all kinds of information, including the route, past rides, things that are upcoming. Unfortunately, with COVID this summer, it was canceled kind of last minute in May, which I hate for some of the guys that have committed their summers and may not be able to do it, but they'll be looking to come back strong next year. And, I think there's always an opportunity to join the guys as they continue across country for segments of the ride, for a day, to host events, to get involved, to put somebody up and lodge them for the night, to do a fundraiser in your hometown, all sorts of opportunities like that. So bike4alz.org.
Nice. Excellent. All right, guys. So here's the last question, right? So you're looking back, you're 32, 31 years old, you got a career. Chaz, you got a beautiful young daughter there that decided to make a cameo.
Yeah, they might be more to pop in. So
yeah, no worries. That's the point. So Chaz, I'll start with you. So you look back, right? What advice would you give your 20-year-old FIGAM self as you've gone through the chapter and really gone out and done something unique and different? What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I would say, we're all always so unsure of ourselves as young men. I mean, even still, right? That never ends. And so coming into college and things, I was, I had done okay in high school and done a few different things, but when I met guys like Tyler and other guys in the chapter, it just opened up so many doors for new and exciting things to happen. So I would say, like, to my 20-year-old self, I would just tell him, like, listen, anything's on the table. You want to do something, you want to ride your bike across America, you want to go do something big, like, it's possible. And a big reason it is possible is because I was surrounded by just some extraordinary young men, guys that I looked at and I said, man, I want to be like them. I want to do something with my life. And they challenged me, they pushed me. I still remember, even as we're talking about this, stories pop up in my head. And when we were training for the ride, I remember me and Tyler and Wade, who was one of the guys that rode with us, we rode from Bowling Green, Kentucky to Lexington, Kentucky, which is where the headquarters for Fiji is. And it was like a 3-day ride. I think it was the last day. It was pouring down rain. The route we were struggling with, and I think I might have been the first one to be like, oh guys, let's just call it, let's just have someone's mom pick us up or something, And Tyler and Wade kind of looked at me like, no, man, like we started this, we're going to finish it. And there were several moments like that. And, that I can speak for that where I was challenged. They said, hey, you can do this. Like, we're not going to stop. And I've taken that into the rest of my life, and in moments where I felt like it was too tough or not possible, where I thought, with the right people around you, like, anything is possible. And so I would just say, like, to 20-year-old self, hey, you joined this great group of young men, just kind of lean into that and learn from them and let them challenge you. And you're going to come out just a way better man for it. And 12 years later, I guess 11 years later, since this bike ride, I can just say that I'm forever grateful for the challenge of the ride, for the guys I did it with, for the guys that were in my chapter, that supported us, for the guys that we met along the way, who I still consider friends. Dana Hess, who's a vital part of the ride. He's a chapter brother of Kite, and now he came out to my small town of Washington and met me for dinner there, a few months ago. And these guys are my forever friends. And so I would just say to my 20-year-old self, yeah, anything's possible. Anything's on the table. Lean into these guys around you and just go for it.
Nice. Very good advice. Good advice.
Yeah.
Tyler, you're up. Your 20-year-old self, you're looking back.
Man.
What advice do you have?
I get caught up listening to Chaz and don't think about what I'm actually going to respond with, because I spent a few years in college getting to hear him speak in the chapter and always enjoyed that. So my 20-year-old self, I'd say two things. I'd say continue to expand your horizons and never stop believing in yourself. And the reason I say that is I'm from a small town in Kentucky. My grandfather was a dairy farmer. I was a first generation college student. When I told people I wanted to bike across country, even the guy at my local bike shop in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, looked at me like I was crazy. And I told you all this story last week. And I love my grandmother to death, but she's a little bit ornery. And I remember her visiting the spring of 2010, before we went on the ride, and her and my mom and I were out eating barbecue at a little spot off WKU's campus. And she said, Tyler, now when you get into this, a week into this, and you're ready to quit, don't call me asking for money to fly home. And mind you, this is the grandmother whose husband's the one that passed away from Alzheimer's that I'm doing this whole thing for. So that's a discouraging thing to hear as a 20-year-old that's putting all this time and effort, waking up at 5 a.m. to go to a cycling class when most people are sleeping through their 8 and 9 a.m. classes, working my tail off, staying up till midnight, responding to emails and trying to reach out and get sponsors lined up, planning a route. That can be the type of thing that you hear from a loved one, and it just totally shuts you down. But I think that, I've always believed in myself and what I was capable of doing. And, you need to surround yourself with people that also believe in you. People like Chaz, the other guys on the ride, that encourage and build you up, because people are going to doubt you your whole life. And I think we can really accomplish great things when we're, in brotherhood with great people, in community with great people. That's what makes us the best version of ourselves. So continue to look for opportunities and people that, call you to your highest potential. And I think that we can all accomplish a lot if we do that, because the easy thing, the more comfortable thing in life is to just do what's convenient and closely accessible. It's hard for me to get on a plane and go visit Chaz in Washington right now. And it's easier for me to just hang around with whoever lives down the street. But the most enriching thing for my life might be to call up Chaz and tell him I'm gonna fly up to Washington and come visit him next summer. So
come on, man.
There we go. Well,
yeah, I would say, this is kind of repeating ourselves, but I would just tell any 20-year-old or any young guy, there's so many people with so many great ideas, and it can be overwhelming to think about, I want to do this, I want to do that. And if you want to do something significant with your life, or something significant in your life, you have to have awesome people around you. That's just a fact. You can't do it alone. You have to have some help along the way. You have to have people that inspire you. And so I can just say, for me, the Fijis at Western Kentucky, those were the kind of men I wanted to be like. And so if you find people that you want to be like, then just be around them, eat up what they're saying, join them in whatever they're doing, and you're going to be better off. So that's what I would tell any young guys: get around great men.
Yeah. I was at a young professionals meeting a few years ago, and this guy got up and he was on a panel, and somebody asked him a question similar to this, and he said, seek out the opportunities in your life where you can be the youngest, dumbest, poorest person in the room, and you'll be better off for it. If you can look around the room and you're the youngest, dumbest, poorest person, you're in the right company, and you're going to end up being better off. So, and like you said, Chaz, life fulfillment, I think, is about like execution of your ideas and goals. And I can tell you from being in business and being in different families and things like that, a lot of people like to talk about what they're going to do with their life or what their plans might be in 5 years, but you just got to act on it. You just got to pull the trigger and go for it. And the worst that you can do is say, well, crap, that didn't work out the way I planned on it. But the lessons you learn from that are going to help you get to where you want to be. So,
yeah, that's great. Yeah. Absolute perfect advice. So I want the brothers in the audience to know that the setup that Chaz has over his left shoulder was not staged at all, right? So he just jumped on and Chaz, you were saying that's literally the bike, that first one. If you can see it, it says Scott. That's the bike that you did it.
Yeah. Special shout out to Scott Bikes.
Yeah.
Actually,
cool.
When that bike, I was telling you before, but me and Tyler had met a guy in Bowling Green who was selling it, and Tyler was kind of interested, and then I jumped in and swooped in and bought it. So, but yeah, that bike is, I mean, goodness, I mean, the 3,200 miles from the ride. I mean, that bike easily has over 400, not 400, easily has over 4,000 miles on it. So it's got some stories for sure.
Yeah. Well, you guys have been terrific. What you've accomplished when you started as undergraduates to where the organization is now is absolutely super impressive. You know, when I spoke to you guys last week, I was like, we definitely have to have you on. So I can't thank you enough for sharing your story, talking about the influence it's had in your life, and certainly encouraging other brothers to stand up and just go for it. So thank you, Chaz, Tyler. Appreciate you joining us today. And I'd also like to thank all of you for joining us today on the banks. We look forward to seeing you again. We're going to meet some new brothers, hear some amazing stories, and really talk about shared values of the fraternity. So until next time, just want to say I'm mighty proud to be a Fiji. Take care.